Hey guys, welcome back to our 2024 real estate market forecast. Once again, super excited. My man, Nick Manfredi, Manfredi Group.
That's right.
How many years have we done this? A few?
Been doing this?
Well, no. How long have we been doing this?
I don't know. For a lot of years, because we've known each other ever since I had the Investors Club.
A lot, way back to the Investor Club.
Yeah.
Okay.
Years and years.
You are actually the last in-studio interview that we're doing.
Save the best for last.
Yeah, that's right. That 100%. And it's funny. You actually sat in and you watched the Barry Lee O'Connor interview. As a long-term investor, you're sitting there listening to Barry. It just like learning stuff. Like what? What are we doing? What's going on here?
Yeah.
So
it reminds me of all the stuff that I don't do wrong, but you kind of do wrong.
You kind of learn along the way. So which is what we're doing. We're learning a little bit. So So on the introduction side, I'm trying to remember the first time we met. It was probably in Corona at the Investment Club. How long did you do that? What's the history of that investment club?
That investment club, 2001 is when I started it. Jack Fullerton kind of inspired me to kind of do it. I was a therapist, a psychotherapist for a while, and I ended up doing cancer programs for the American Cancer Society, and I ended up being a really educated non-cancer person, and I said, I just got to do that with real estate. Okay. So that's what caused me to create it, and I really only did it to create contacts for myself and to learn faster. Yeah. I never did it to really make money or anything like that, and it really didn't make a lot of money. It was really designed just to educate myself. Yeah,
but you had a thing going there for a while.
I loved it. I loved doing it.
Yeah, you were good at it. You were good at it. The club was good. I remember it being valuable back at that day. And so you're still going strong though, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been learned through tough times, but I've been blessed. We've been blessed. Yeah.
Well, you and I are a lot alike in that matter. We did very little prep for this, talked a little bit a day or two ago, and frankly, we used a little bit of last year's forecast and some of the stuff we talked about.
We're going to talk about why it didn't go right, but kind of didn't go right, but we'll see.
I wouldn't be too hard on yourself or hard on yourself at all, because there's a lot of unusual things, and we're going to get into all of them. We have no time limit today. But I want to talk about the audience, because just before we said, some of this stuff can be boring, a lot of charts, a lot of graphs, very analytical. But I mean, that's honestly, I think where I get along so well with you, because that's me. And I've been saying for years, a big part of why I do that, matter of fact, not a big part, the main and only reason I've been doing these market forecasts for 13 years now, because it was part of my business plan. Yeah. And I was chasing Chris Thornburg all over the country. I mean, back then he wasn't as available maybe as he is now. I mean, if you wanted to see him, you went to Florida or you went to a Rio Mac conference or an NRBA conference in Texas and whatever. And I'm spending all this money chasing Chris around. I said, geez, let me do my own thing. And in what we do, if you're not looking at the data, making the best assessment, you're in trouble.
You want to keep those people close.
You're in trouble.
Chris Thornburg is a person that you want to keep as close as you possibly can. Yep. No one has done, for the right reasons, the calls that he has made.
He made the calls.
For the right reasons. Other people make calls, and maybe they got it, who knows why they got it right. He's made, since 2006 when I met him, when I had his hedge fund come out, and he was doing the collateralized debt obligations, kind of the movie The Big Short. Yep. And he was still the same guy, a little confident, a little bit.
More then than now? Is that possible?
But he was just really new his stuff, and long story short is, you follow that guy along, and he stands out. I mean, Bruce Norris, spectacular, but on a macro scale, Chris Thornburg, and I'm a big believer in having a way to go ahead and have a multiple choice on what is the correct answer. And you got to weight his as the probability is pretty high.
Well, you have to, because and sometimes his confidence level is so extreme, so confident.
Well, he also talks off the cuff, like with his items, and then you go, that makes perfect sense. Yep. And it's, I hate to call him genius, because he'll probably like it too much, but he is.
No, he would love that.
He would love it.
He's watching right now. Of course.
And what sucked is last year I was like not in agreement with him. I go, you got to respect yourself, Nick.
Well, the one thing with Chris, and Chris is our keynote again for our 2024 forecast.
Yeah.
So, but going to the more current analysis of the data, we're in COVID. We're in this room. I think we're in this room. We're in the studio. We're in the studio next door, and it's COVID.
Yeah.
Oops, is that screen glitching? Anyway, it's like day one, week one of lockdown, COVID. And, during that period of time, we brought Chris in, and we had Manfredi Kyle come in from Claremont McKenna. And and you could see that immediate, matter of fact, I think you might have a slide that's going to reflect that, because Nick has some slides for us we're going to go through. And you've got that immediate drop down where everything, this world just stopped. And then the debate was, is it going to immediately bounce back, or are we going to do the L? And Chris was, no, it's going to be a V. It's going to be a V. And he was like, it's going to be a V. And you got to, I remember being there and being nervous and being a little scared. And I'm like, man, we've never done this before. We're like on full-blown lockdown. The world is ending. And within 30 days, it was like, even though we were still in it, and we were in the whole COVID thing for another 18 to 24 months, but as far as the economic stuff was concerned, and those indicators, he was 100% spot on, and he was right.
Yeah.
And then there's been all this talk of recession for the last couple of years, and he's like, the indicators don't show it.
And his confidence level when he's doing it, you're like, man, does that guy need to be that confident in what he's saying?
Yeah.
But then you go back and you view it 2 years later.
Then it makes perfect sense.
You're like, dang, I was smoking.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to flatter the guy. I hate his politics.
It's crazy,
I hate his politics.
Well, heck, man, we're 10 minutes into our interview, and we're talking about Chris Thornburg.
Okay, sorry.
Oh my gosh. No, it's okay.
He's
because
key. And that's with all of the stuff that I'm going to cover is it's a smattering of Bruce Norris. It's a smattering of what Thornburg said, because it's just multiple choice. Everything is possible.
Right.
What is probable? And I'm just trying to make the best choice I can, given what I love the topic, what they've all said, what everybody is kind of saying. And this is my bet.
Adjusting along the way.
That's right.
And hey, if you got it right, great. If not, you adjust. Okay, before we jump into your stuff, we'll talk about our audience a little bit. Okay, so by the way, I've got 2 segments of the audience, and you heard this when we did the interview with Barry Lee O'Connor. Barry Lee is an industry guy. To me, you are a little bit of both. You're a real estate industry, an investor, a professional investor, landlord, but you're also the guy who sits back and looks at the data, and you've got an opinion, and this is where things are going to go, which is the forecast side of this.
Right.
So you kind of check a couple boxes here. So, but our audience, I think, for you and I, are going to be a lot of the landlords that I manage properties for at Cobalt Property Management. And investors. We'll have a couple of tenants that pop in, and we always want our tenants to graduate and buy houses and all the rest of that. But I think for the most part, landlords, investors, and realtors. I mean, we got a good chunk of our audience that is realtors, and you've probably done business with a good percentage of them anyway. So what Nick and I had talked about is we're going to go. Nick, you prepared some charts, so we're going to go through, got about a dozen charts, and we're just going to kind of go through your thing. And does this first one kind of start with where we were? Do you want to talk about your predictions from last year?
Yeah. Well, let's start. I'd rather start with when I was accurate and I sold all my properties from 2005, January 2005 to January 2006.
By the way, you want to stop on this slide, or
we could stop right here right now.
All right.
And when I did that, I sold it right here.
Okay.
So it wasn't like I didn't call it. Actually, I had a good economics mentor was Bruce, who's saying, and it made perfect sense.
Yep.
It was totally logical.
Yep.
So when you say I called it, one could say I had the cojones to go ahead and make a decision to sell everything.
You got the data, you made a decision.
I sold everything, and I did exchange. I owned the Delta Airlines building and 22 houses in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex by 2006.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to say you called, it's another thing to put millions and millions and millions into that call.
Right.
So that was based off affordability.
But wait a minute. You didn't. It wasn't just like an accident. Something just didn't happen in your life that said, I have to sell these.
Right.
You looked at data, you were Bruce and whoever else you were looking at, and you made a decision to put your investment future in a sell. Yeah. And you did it in 2005.
I did it all in, I was in a hurry, and I had family members saying, where's your big crash, Nick? And kind of really mocking me.
Yeah.
Because it was 2007 before it started to happen.
Yeah.
And it's a mathematical certainty, just like in the sinking of the Titanic from the movie.
Yeah.
It's a mathematical certainty, and I had to stick with it.
Yeah.
So, by 2008, they're like, "Wow, Nick." They started calling me Nostradamus. It wasn't me. It was good people who were providing the information, and it was a multiple choice that I had. Answer A, B, C, D. D is sell everything or just about everything, and move it to Texas as a holding bin to come back. So based on the numbers, the same exact thing that caused me to make the call this time on what I was going to do.
Yep.
I made that same call based on that. It's still not a bad call, because if you would have sold everything in 2021, you would have still had all that dough, and you wouldn't have made a mistake.
Right.
It's not a mistake.
Well, you wouldn't have been wrong in 2021.
Nope.
I mean, one of the hedge funds I was doing business with, we haven't talked about this in a while, but they basically sold in actually pre-2021. They sold pre-COVID. And they they had 90% of what we sold. We sold 351 houses for them, most of which had closed escrow in 2019. We had a few that we kind of wrapped up in 2020 and early COVID. And then their decision was, hey, man, we've done well. They bought in 2010 and 11 and 12. They had a 5-year hold. They ended up holding for 10. Is that right? Yeah, about 10. Did extremely well. Now, in hindsight, you could have sat back and said, well, you should have held for 2 more years.
Right.
40% on the table. They're responsible. Well, no, we didn't. We reinvested it. Maybe the return wasn't a 20% in 2020 and another 20%, but they did fine. So, trying to call the top.
Go broke closing your hand and taking a profit.
Trying to close at the top of the market is crazy.
Yeah.
But I want to go back before we get off of this.
Yeah.
So, and you got to give yourself some credit for selling in 05. I can remember in that same period of time, and we're talking about when we met Chris, and I think you might have known him a couple of years before I did. And it was in J.W. Marriott, I think, down in Palm Desert, and he was speaking at Rio Mac. And he did the call. And I'm sitting with a whole bunch of foreclosure brokers in the room, but there was no foreclosure business, which is really, really interesting.
Right.
So you got all these people. And the reason the foreclosure brokers were in the room, the REO brokers, is because we had been REO brokers in 1990, whatever that was, 4, 5, and 96. And it was a shorter cycle. It felt like tragedy back then in the mid-90s. And then the market stabilized, and then we had a great run-up, which is so weird. 2001, September 11th. I'm sitting in my office in Marina Valley. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the world's ending. And in many ways, it changed a lot. But then we had a very nice real estate run-up after September 11th until 2005. But point being is, you got all these brokers, myself included, in 05, thinking something's happening. Something's happening. And maybe I was thinking that because of Chris Thornburg. So I'm calling all my contacts at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And I'm like, I'm here. I'm here. They're like, well, congratulations. We got no business there, Southern California. I'm like, and I kept anticipating them to say, verify my feeling or verify what Chris Thornburg was saying. Oh yeah, it's coming. You get ready. We just get, and they're like, no, we don't have anything in California. I'm like, well, you're expecting some, right? They're like, no, we're not expecting anything. I mean, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
So for the fact that you made the call, when you got, in theory, these reasonably connected people back in Dallas with Fannie and Freddie Mac saying, nothing's happening, everything's fine. And then within 18 months, everything was not fine.
Well, I not only sold it all, in 2006, when I was done with all my exchanges, I created the short sale processor, which was California's first short sale processing company, before the fall as well. Right. So Thornburg had Andrew Lottie and his hedge fund and everything. It was a mathematical certainty. You could see it.
Titanic quote.
Yeah, it was going to happen. Yep. It was just, there was a period of being uncomfortable, but it just couldn't. I still feel like it's that way now.
Okay.
I believe strongly it is that way now. We just have a few things that have buoyed it, but those same pressures that dropped it, most of them are still there, save foreclosures. Save foreclosures, the same pressures of things not being affordable are still all there.
Well, the affordability thing, and you've got your chart. Well, not to skip ahead, but that 17% number, which we've all looked at that. When affordability hits 17%, bad things happen.
Right.
And we're at we're there.
Yeah.
But I know you also have a chart about inventory, so maybe we'll not skip ahead, but we'll.
Well, let's say what does this say? What is this thing saying? Just for our.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
What does it say?
Yeah.
If you look at 1979, we hit the top. That's what properties. This is what properties with inflation-adjusted numbers were kind of costing people, families, in the U.S., not just California, but in the U.S.
Yep.
So you see it pop up in 1979, and then guess what it did? It dropped down. Well, then it popped up back all the way to 1989. We kind of had the Gulf War and everything, the savings and loan debacle. And then what does it do? It drops down. And then we have this huge run up, liar loans, et cetera, and this housing bubble. And what happens? It drops down. And then we have this huge run up. But this time, most of the people I talk to, or what I hear, it's going to be fine, other than periodically the people who are housing bubble crashers who really don't have a good reason as to why it's going to.
I don't know if it's going to be fine, because I guess I could be one of those that have said it's going to be fine. I would just say, it's funny, because you say this, and then me says, the meme, this time is different.
Yeah.
Right? But it is at least a little bit. The liar loans, the amount of equity, and quite honestly, and this is such an easy thing to say now because everybody's kind of on the, we've got this rate lock issue.
Yeah.
Where as those property values are running up, and now we've got just, whatever the percentage is, I don't want to give a bad number, but a significant percentage of mortgages right now at sub 3 or certainly sub 4% interest rates. And they're locked in and they've got some equity. But what if they don't? What if things start to get a little bit ugly?
Well, here's a better question.
Okay.
How many people sell their home in the state of California each year? Talk about tenure, but what percentage of the people?
I don't know about the percentage, but I think right now we're CAR says we're going to have about 430,000.
The important thing I like is with probabilities is there's about between 6.6 to 9% of the population is still moving.
Oh yeah.
And then so what percentage of those are FHA or people with not much equity? Now compound that for the last 2 years because they have 6% mortgage rates, and if they got FHA loan, they don't have a lot of equity. And go over the next 5 years. Now what's the probability that things get tough? It increases only with time. Yeah. So time is not on the side of it's going to stay like this.
Yeah.
For a multitude of reasons.
Right. It's hard to disagree with that. Yep. Okay, so what do we got? You want to go next one?
Sure.
What do we got here next?
So this is one of my favorite slides. It is reminiscent majorly to the Bruce's.
No, this is Bruce's 17%.
It is. And what you see is prices. I should say this is affordability. So most people know that affordability is the percentage of the index, the percentage of people with a median price home. Or who are going to buy a median price home, who can afford it.
Right.
And so when you go back, a lot of people are going to remember 1980, and it got all the way down 1979 to 17%. And Bruce really was the one that put all that together. Yep. What was it in 1989, 1990? 17%.
Yep.
Was that an accident? We get down to 13%, but it's liar loans that really allow for that. My guess is we would have stopped if they had to really qualify to get the loan.
Right.
Ballparking it to 17%.
Yep.
Where do we end up? A little bit lower in 2022 at 16%, but it's because interest rates were a factor, and they rose so fast that we got below 17%. Then last year we're at 20% because we had that correction, 16.5% decrease in the state of California. So literally affordability went up before supply got pinched, and then it ends up going down.
But supply got pinched, and then rates. I think it's a combination of supply getting pinched because we had supply issues also in 2022.
Sure.
But we had that jump up in rates from 3% to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 and 8. Mm-hmm. And now I think that people have almost become accustomed. They're like, okay, rates are going to be at 7. Rates are going to be at 6.5. I mean, heck, 3 weeks ago rates were knocking on 8 again.
What would Thornburg say about that?
In what regard?
He would say, because he did say, that back in the 80s, he said, remember, I'm a real estate guy in as much as I was raised off eating commission checks. Yeah, is what he said.
Because his dad was a broker.
Exactly, and what he said was interest rates were going up, and he asked his dad when the best time for real estate was. And he said 1980, 85. He threw that in there, 83, 84, 85, something like that. It was right during those times of interest rates rising.
Yep.
And he said, because people got used to the interest rate.
Right.
They go, eh.
Right.
The difference this time, the only difference, because he kind of alluded that who cares about interest rates? I think interest rates are more important whenever, if you look back then, the amount of money that a family had to pay for their housing was still, comparatively to where it is right now, much lower than what it is right now. They had still more room.
Yeah, it's like 40% now. I just did an interview with Brett Reichel, a lender with oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the company name. How embarrassing that is. But you know the affordability from a standpoint, it's a 40%. 40% of income is required to go to support housing. That's a big number. That's a
It's
big.
It's bigger than that.
Wow, I don't know what other factor he was throwing in there.
Yeah, it's way that's off.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh no, it's
because it was 75% in 2022 for a median priced home. For a median priced home, but
you're not going to get a loan with the 75%.
So then, what you really have to look, if we're going to speak about averages in the state of California, you have to take the median income, which in 22 was $83,000. It's like $87,000 now. So you have to take, what do Californians earn? And if you just
but those people aren't buying houses though.
Well,
they're renting houses.
We're skewing the data for a population that doesn't really matter. The reality is Californians earn about $87,000 as a household income, and if I'm going to make a bet on what to do with Nick Manfredi's money, then I'm going to bet based on where the preponderance of the population lies. And that's what's going to throw it. But they like 40%. That whenever they're going to get a loan, they want to see the ratios at roughly 35, 33, 40%. But that's not where Californians are. So in terms of our conversation of where should things go, $87,000 is what Californians make. And it goes up fairly slowly. Well, that's going to give us a good idea of, based on what things could happen in our economy over the next 5 years.
Right.
What should happen?
Okay.
Because
what should happen?
Because that number of household income, it basically tracks inflation. Generally speaking, hopefully it will this time too, because then people would be making potentially 40% more, by the time we inflate out.
Okay, so what are you saying though? So what should happen? That's not talking code. So what
should happen is according to this chart, you have mean affordability is at 30%.
Yep.
All right. It should somehow this slide whenever it came over didn't quite end up right, but this red line should be right here. So if you go over since 1977 and you take the mean affordability of where it's generally been, it's gone from 40% down to 17, from then 35% down to 17, from 44% down to 13, all the way up to 55. But if you mean that out, it ends up being 30%. So there's a term called regression towards the mean in statistics. I would bet on regression towards the mean.
Which basically means price.
It has to be erosion to prices.
Which is where we left off last year.
And affordability that would need to track as well. That's what should...
Prices come down, affordability comes back up.
Yeah.
Or in theory, interest rates come back down, affordability comes back up. But does it?
When I listen to really intelligent economists, they'll say things like this. If you can understand how people respond to financial stimuli, you can understand economics.
Yeah.
Well, you have a longitudinal study of how people respond right here. So I'm not taking anything novel. And by the way, I'm not totally predicting anything that is, statistically this. I'm just looking at people. How do people respond?
Right.
So what should happen is we should be heading into, on the next slide, or one of the next slides that shows it,
let's see if we
should be heading in this range. What this did, this is doesn't have a ton of other people supplying similar information that's out there. But what this is these are the blue lines are representative of the coolest times in real estate.
Okay.
Kind of like the bad times, the bottoms of the market. So you had a bottom of the market in 83, 96, 2009. And in March 2023, that was just where we were whenever I did the last presentation. It was definitely not the coolest time.
Yep.
The highest time was, of course, June of 22,
yep.
2006, and 1991.
On fire. Yep.
So what these previous cycles, these over here kind of tell me is, how motivated were individuals to go ahead and acquire a new home during a really cold time in housing, the bottom, the troughs of housing. And if I was just to take the last 3 troughs and go out to where we are today, where could we be if we just average those? Right. I'm not trying to call 29%, who knows? Right. I'm not trying to call 51%. I'm just trying to say, what's the average? And it ends up being that if the motivation level of Californians diminishes on average to where it was because of price declines, we should be at the average. It would say 38%. Could be 29%, could be, I don't think it's going to be 51%, but it would be somewhere within that range. That's all this does. It's just averaging, by the way, the payment. Whenever, remember back in the past, we always talked about people don't buy a house based on the price but on the mortgage amount. Yeah. That's what this really discusses in the bottom of the market. It's measuring the motivation to purchase a house based on the payment as a percentage of the median income at the bottom. Does that make sense?
It does. But why didn't the chart work last year?
The good question, and I do have another slide that beats up on me as to why it doesn't. But this at least gives, like, why did I, if I was going to sell my properties, why was I betting on a price decline? And I had people like Bruce. We had 30 emails going back and forth. Yep. And he giggles at me a little bit. I love him to death, and he's like, I really love Bruce to death. But I didn't find what he said as to why it would not decrease as persuasive at all.
Yeah, but did you go to his market timing event last year? So I'm going to go back.
I was there.
So this chart worked, okay, and then this chart, everything worked, and I think I'm quoting Bruce. If I'm not quoting Bruce, I'm quoting somebody that spoke at last year's forecast or within.
Well, he used me. He said, "But Nick's wrong."
But what he said or what somebody was saying was that the charts aren't working. The way the charts are today, they're not predictive, and
they haven't worked.
They have not. But that's because things are, again, it's different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which, again, it's a scary thing to say, because then you look back 6 months later or a year later and say, well, no, you lied. It wasn't different this time. You missed it, or you didn't want to see it. That's always the thing that I get accused of is, you're pie in the sky. I'm like, man, I was that guy back then.
Yeah.
Who I do a sales meeting in my real estate office, and I'd have people come up to me after the meeting, because I do the same thing. I'm doing the same stuff.
Yeah.
Every month for 25 years. And I go, oh, Lance, God, it's so negative. I'm like, you see it as negative because you look at this as a sales meeting. Mm-hmm. You think I just did a sales meeting. That wasn't a sales meeting. This is a business planning meeting.
Education.
And we're, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And if the numbers are reflecting a certain direction, then I'm like, hey, guys, maybe we might want to adjust our business plan a little bit. Or at least prepare for that. But I think you've got a chart in here. I'm just going to come right out there because now I feel like I'm getting cute. I think the reasons that the charts don't work is because we have this phenomenon of this lowest inventory in the history of our market.
Yeah.
And if you can, as a matter of fact, I did this yesterday. I wish I would have taken that chart and thrown it up. I was looking at inventory, and the numbers are going to be wrong, but I'll try to get the percentages as close as I can. I think in the entire CRMLS, which is difficult to use the entire CRMLS because there's 100,000 members and it goes up in Northern California into a market that I'm not that familiar with. But end of last month, end of April, 22,000 listings or so. 22,000 in the entire MLS. And then I just randomly, it was April 2024. So I got my chart up and I said, let's go back 10 years. It was nothing magical, but I said 10 years, so we went to April of 2014. So somewhere in here. And there was 82,000 active listings. 10 years. Now the sales were interesting because the number of sales, bringing it back to 2024 now, a month ago, 22,000 listings approximately. And I think the number of pending sales in that given month was about 12. I'm going to be off a little bit, but it was a much smaller number And then going back to the 2014 number, 80 plus thousand listings and like 18,000 in escrow.
Yeah.
So just that ratio was about 19% of the properties that were active had another property in escrow, and in our current market, it's close to 50%. So inventory. So what changes that inventory, and does that how do you factor in the fact that we don't have as many houses to sell? Forget about why.
Oh no, why?
Or what brings more houses to the
Well,
market?
I have a slide of what's going to say what could bring it. It's not necessarily the next one.
Does this help?
We touched on this one. This is just saying why
Volume.
is it?
Okay.
Why
this is actually good.
Yeah. Why is it that we didn't see that the price declines that I expected? Now, to give him full credit, Bruce said people aren't going to sell their house.
Okay.
Because they're not going to want to go from a 3 to a 7.
True.
I thought, I think that there's going to be other things. There's going to be problems or what have you.
But those people did sell.
We
The
didn't.
people
We
with problems did
didn't
sell.
go into a recession though. Usually, the residential real estate, it kind of goes a little bit before that recession, so to speak.
Yep.
Well, this time that didn't happen. We didn't have a recession, and people really didn't sell their home because of that. 3%, they sell their home, they're going to actually be spending more when they buy the next one because it's 7%.
Right, they don't want to trade.
Even if they use all their equity.
Right.
So why didn't it happen? It only didn't happen, in my opinion, from all the multiple choice answers that I've listened to from other people. The only reason is supply, and that makes intuitive sense.
Right.
So if we don't have to make it more difficult than that, we had, and everybody's on that would watch us say, duh. But the reality,
well, you can say "duh" now.
Yeah,
you couldn't say "duh."
That's right. That's right. They would say that, so what I'm kind of getting to is that this right here is the only reason. So my next question for my money, for my properties, for the properties that I'm flipping, for the properties because I buy and flip as my job and I buy and hold as an investor.
Okay.
What is it that could bring us back to losing 2% a month, like we saw from July of 2022 through January of 2023?
And
in 6 months.
And the answer is?
There's a bunch of reasons. There's a bunch of ways that
Well, let's be
supply
clear,
can come
because
back.
I want to make sure our audience understands where we're at. First of all, this chart is volume.
Yep.
This is sales volume. This is transactions. Houses being transaction, and you've got the EKG, and without even knowing this is probably January or December and January, and this is somewhere between July and August. And
Right.
that's just what we do. You got a little COVID weirdness in there. But if you can see the slide all the way behind Nick, I mean, all-time
Low.
record
History.
low.
In history.
Right, and I talk about this all the time on my market snapshots because, in part, I'm selfish, and it's not, I'm selfish because I run a real estate operation, and in order to pay the rent, we need transactions, and when you're not running transactions, you run into trouble.
I thought you were just self-aware.
I am self-aware, very self-aware. Absolutely. Is that what did I say?
Yeah, you said because you're selfish.
I meant to say self-aware.
There you go.
Yes. So we've got these all-time record lows. You had some transactions shoot up.
Yeah.
But again, in part.
And then we're
Well, right. But again, look what we've done from an well, you've got that. But this is
the only thing that's keeping prices where it is.
Right, but that's a super shock though too. That's that super shock of interest rates going from 3 to 8. Okay. And then we start to see a little improvement, and we get interest rates back down below 7, 6.5.
You could say that, but other people would say that housing tenure was increasing prior to this. That was
True.
It was so we really what's going to change this is there has to be some type of black swan, some other events, not just a black swan. And black swans seem to always show up. Okay. So I don't like to even call them black swans. We just use it, to help us describe things that we don't understand. But this is the only thing that's keeping prices where they're at, because during this time period, we had property values decrease 16.5%, and there's only one thing that stopped it, and it was that it continued to go down. That was it. So if we were at 17%, there would be argument against this. If we went 17%, but everybody still qualified for the loan, we wouldn't have as many foreclosures. I still think we would have had the price decrease, but just not as fast as what we saw.
But you said foreclosures. We didn't have any foreclosures.
No, that's what I'm saying. We didn't have any foreclosures. Right. So in other words, it probably wouldn't have done. It wasn't going to go down as fast as it did from 2007 to 2010. It was just going to take a longer slide because whenever people say, "What is in it for me to buy a house when prices are going down slowly?" Painfully, but I can still rent it for almost half the price.
Well, that's a whole other part of the conversation.
That's right. Then what happens is motivation. We got to motivation at that blue level. Motivation diminishes, and it just finds that happy bottom.
Right.
When it finds that happy bottom, and it's that the average was 38%.
Yeah, but it's interesting, and man, we could go down this road.
Yeah, we can go down the road.
Well, and we touched on this briefly with Barry O'Connor, and honestly, I have to go back and watch the tape. I felt like I misheard something because I think I disagreed with him on where we are with rents. I mean, rents have been extraordinary, and they've been going up at a pace that's, again, feels unsustainable.
Yeah.
I truly think it's
I think
completely a government policy in the form of the Tenant Protection Act and the, in effect, the rent control that we now have, this 5+5 not to exceed 10% in most cases. But no, again, so if I'm an owner and I've got a low interest rate, or maybe I'm even in a little bit of trouble, okay, I've lost my job, I've got some divorce, maybe I have some equity, but I'm like, okay, maybe I need to sell or maybe I have to sell. But man, if I sell, I'm going to trade my $2,500 a month house payment for a $2,800 a month rent payment. And I've got a house that maybe I bought for $500,000 put a little bit of money down. Maybe it's now worth $800,000 or even $900,000 or even more, but I still have a $2,500 a month payment. Do I want to trade my house for a $2,500 a rent a month, 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment in the city of Riverside? And I think once those people actually get out and start looking around, like, hey, honey, we got to do everything we can to hang on to this house. We didn't have that. We didn't have that back here, you know? Because number one, they didn't have any choices, and the values were completely upside down, and they had no ability to hold on to it, and they probably couldn't qualify for the loan or in the beginning, because again, the liar loans and all the rest of that. But to me, that rental pressure, because there's certainly no moral hazard anymore. It's like, you know, people have no problem walking away from obligations all day long, but there is that financial side with, you know, the inventory's low, the payments in many of these people's payments are going to be cheaper than what they could do rent.
But you're also only talking about owner occupants, and there's a I haven't bought many homes from owner occupants, you know, where I could buy it where I like to buy it at a significant discount. Okay. It's usually death, drugs, divorce, don't have a job, dilapidation, deadbeat tenants. Yep. Those are still the same reason, and as the amount of the renovation costs, I mean, people start making decisions because they don't have $70,000 to renovate the house. Right. So I don't really like to use just owner occupants as a reason as to what could happen to prices and why they might be sticky. Right now, it's a decent reason, but I think people are, just like Thornburg said, people are they adjusted in the 1980s. Yeah. I think over time, people are mentally going to adjust, and a larger population of individuals are going to have 6% loans and not very much equity. And you put over time.
No, but that changes everything.
That changes it. Well, that's why when I look at it, when we look at it as investors, we're not looking at next year. Right. We're looking at 5 years down the road at the very least, and I don't have any good bets for 5 years down the road. I don't. Right. I don't. Yeah. I wouldn't make a good bet.
Okay, what do we got next? What do we
this is really like factors that stalled this price decline. So this is like whenever we went ahead and we had the median price in the state of California was $900,000, and then in 6 months we were $150,000 down. Yep. Some people say, well, that was just a different grouping of product that got sold because interest rates went up. No. I was looking and comping out houses, my father's house in Mission Viejo that I lived in for when I was a kid, and just comping it out, looking at all. No, all prices. Orange County was falling off the face of the planet.
We were talking.
Yeah.
We were talking about it. Yep.
So real prices on the exact same homes was going down. Factors that stalled it, we already kind of described it. That is supply drop. Yep. That's it. The downward pricing pressures that surfaced in 2022, right, that did this, they're still there.
Yeah, but don't you feel that again, you've got your little medium price box, January 2023 at 7. You got it underneath that COVID V. You've got the COVID recession in there, and you've got the pullback, and then you've got, which it looks like the peak. That's that run up during COVID. That when we all thought the world was going to end for 30 days.
Yeah.
And then in 2020, 20% appreciation.
Yeah.
2021, 20% appreciation, which I believe, if I'm reading your chart right, that is the peak. That is the peak over there. That's going to be.
This is it right here.
Of 2022.
Roughly,
2022, right. So
yeah. We would have. Here's the thing: is if you look at past what California did in the past, you would just say, well, maybe it wouldn't go up that fast. It would have just gone on trend.
Okay.
That you can go back to July 2010. If you just draw a straight line, it's pretty dang straight, isn't it? You would just push it out, and it still would have happened. Right. We still would have hit 17% affordability, and if at that time the median income was $83,000 and everything remained the same, that is interest rates, we still would have hit it. It would have been somewhere over here.
It would have.
Yeah.
But this is why I think the charts don't work, is because we had this crazy, and again, this is like the third time today I've quoted Rick Hoffman. He was on my forecast 2 years ago, and during COVID, and we were talking about what are we going to do when we come out of this? And he would say over and over, and it just struck me to the point where I'm repeating it now. He says, "Not sure. We've never done this before.
Yeah,
we've never had a country that's been locked down. We've never had a country that's gone through, with the vaccination or whatever it happens to be. We've never had a workforce that's basically been encouraged to work from home and maybe never come back. All of these things that we've never done before. We've never had interest rates go from 3 to 7.5%, 8% in a period of 24 months. So do they? I don't think it was you. Was it you or somebody was just saying about just things just kind of level themselves out. So are we? So what's your call? What's your call?
Well, go to the next slide. We'll get to it. I'll try and hurry up.
No, we don't have to hurry up. Hey, man, we're in studio. We have as much time as we want.
We talked about it already. That 900 I wanted to put at the top to 751 was 7 months.
Yeah.
That is fast, man.
Yeah.
And as an investor, we look at it, that is at such a speed. You better have known that was coming. And all that is right there is right around 17% affordability.
Yeah.
You better have been prepared for that. That's not going to change. And gosh, is it reliable? That 17% is a good figure to.
It's been reliable.
It's been reliable.
Yeah.
So who predicted, by the way, how many people did you hear who said it's January 1st, 2022. Get ready to sell everything. Because they didn't say that.
No, they didn't. But I did monthly snapshots, and you think you saw a few of them.
Yeah.
And we watched it, and we'd track it, and it would feel.
We were still at 20% affordability.
Yeah, but prices were coming down. I'm talking as prices were coming down, and prices were coming down in that chart, and it was. To admit, and maybe my memory's false. I need to go back and overlay an interest rate.
Remember your memory.
Huh?
Remember we talked about this also.
About my memory. Hey, will you cut that out? Leave it in, just kidding. But I just felt it was so much interest rate driven, and it was so much policy driven, and it was so much.
It wasn't
Fed
interest rate driven.
Okay.
It got there faster. We still would have gotten there anyway.
Okay.
Prices were going to inflate.
Then why did they recover so quickly then?
By the way, here's the question.
But this chart is incomplete.
It doesn't go to current. Because it continued to go up.
Now it's back to where it was.
That's right. It's higher than it was. Here's the question.
Okay.
Here's the question. And the thing that, as an investor, when we're having these conversations, I'm speaking to you as an investor on what to do and decisions to make and how to plan. I'm not coming from like a Chris Thornburg, who's spectacular. I'm not competing with that and saying in 2 years, and he's been accurate, this is what's going to happen, or in next year. The point that I wanted to make was, as an investor, is that wasn't well predicted at all.
Correct.
That it was going to happen that fast. But more important, this right here, what you're talking about, it wasn't predicted at all either. No one said, guess what? We're going to increase back to that. The only person.
So why did that happen then?
So why did it was only because of supply.
Well,
why did it increase?
Was down.
That was it. Here's the thing. One would say, oh, it's demand.
Okay.
And you've heard. You hear it over again. Demand is horrible. Demand is horrible for housing. The only thing is, and you say
because supply
is the lowest in history.
Correct.
And guess what? We're going to stick right here at the 17%. We're going to stick right here.
Because we still haven't been able to answer the question, what changes the supply? What changes that supply?
It's on one of the next slides.
Are we ready? I don't know.
We can still. Okay.
Okay.
What can increase housing supply and trigger price declines?
Okay.
So these are just like, I let my mind kind of go as to what might increase these, and increase the supply.
So we're going to have a recession?
No, I'm not saying that we're going to have it. These are just the threats to prices, otherwise known as effects, or I should say things that could occur in our economy and our country that would increase supply. If supply is the only thing that is buoying prices, then what are things that could increase supply?
Let's take down them.
Recession.
Okay, but even the people who are calling for recessions, even the most bearish or bullish, what side would they be on pro-recession?
Sure.
Or even those folks are like, oh, it's going to be short and shallow. So, we'll have a couple quarters. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And again,
I'm not saying it's going to be. By the way, we don't really know when we're going through these. It's probably not one that's going to happen in the next 5 years.
Okay.
So there's no way to. All we're talking about is what are the items that would increase supply if it's only supply that's buoying prices.
Right.
So there's others I haven't even that aren't on this list. That didn't make the list.
Well,
so we just job losses.
Are we seeing that? I mean,
no, I'm just saying. Well, I'm not saying. Well, that's certainly what the Fed wants.
They've been trying.
Yeah,
they've been trying.
So I'm
Isn't it crazy how they want that, but they won't actually come out and say it? In the same way with real estate, they're like, oh, if Powell actually said it,
I know.
I'm going to reset real estate, and
prices,
like,
yeah.
well, and in his chart world, and it seemed to make sense. Well, geez, you want to raise interest rates from 3 to 7%, you're going to reset real estate.
Yeah.
Oops, wait a minute.
He didn't think through the fact that no one would want to sell it.
No one's going to sell.
Supply would.
No one's going to sell.
I don't know if he did or didn't. Really, I don't know what that guy thinks.
I don't.
And I don't like to bring that guy down because hey, some people would tell you, well, I'm happy I still have my job right now. And what if he's making mistakes? I can't tell. And it's not like he tells us everything. But let's keep going. Recession, job. Okay. I think the third one is interesting, is it not?
Well,
this is what you guys all.
But that doesn't. Mortgage rate decreases raise prices.
Unless you're already at 17%.
Yeah, but again, this is where I disagree with you, because I don't think you're going to have demand is.
All I said.
Demand is weaker.
All I said. All this question asks is what would increase supply. That's all it. So let me ask you this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So if you have individuals that are getting used to 7%, and we go down to 5, we go down to 4.
Okay.
Are there going to be more people who sit there and say,
there'll be more people that will sell.
Exactly. So would that increase supply?
It would.
So if supply is the only thing that is buoying prices, is that not a threat to logically?
Well, but then the next question would be, what would supply have to rise to actually be a threat?
Correct.
I mean, if there's a 20% increase in supply,
I think so.
You think that's a threat to prices?
Absolutely. Well, let's put, is it 20% over 6 months, or is it 20% over the first year, 20% the second year?
Okay.
Compounding effect of it.
All right.
War?
Well, let me talk about any moment, I suppose. That's the black swan.
We touched on this, and this is an absolute. This is something that I think that is not. If you take FHA buyers over the next, it's been a year and a half, 2 years, and those people don't have a lot of equity, putting generally speaking 3% down, or maybe 5%. And you say it's been 1 year that they've been doing that, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and you add over the next 5 years all of those FHA buyers at 6% with no equity and not even an ability to potentially have enough equity to sell their home if prices don't for some reason dramatically increase. That in and of itself is just something that I would expect. I would bet on that they're going. More of those are going to end up on the foreclosure as foreclosures. I would expect.
Okay.
Especially if they're spending $5,000 a month, and they can rent it for $2,500.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've been seeing, and I find myself falling into this. Just the first line, time. People get accustomed to the new normal and sell. Yeah. Let's leave off the and sell here for a second. I think we are becoming accustomed to a 7% interest rate. Last year and the year before, again, time flies, but I'm sitting in this room or I'm at the Fox Theater, I'm like, market breaks at 7.
Yeah.
Breaks.
Yeah.
And I think, by the way, you go back, okay, wait, market broke. right? Market broke. Rates, I mean, in that area were 7 or even north of 7. Market breaks at that rate.
It wasn't the rate though; it was the affordability.
I got it, but again, I'm tying the two together, and I know there's not a direct correlation.
Okay.
But I think people are getting used to it.
I think you're dead on, and
this is it. They get accustomed to a new normal, and the new normal is not. Okay, we're not going to see 3% anymore.
That's
we're
right.
not going to see 4.
Right.
And heck, it wasn't that long ago. You could listen to me. I'm quoting Barry Habib and saying, "Hey, we're going to be at a 5% mortgage rate." 6 months ago, or at least in the mid 5s. No, we didn't make that.
Right.
And even 6 months ago, they're saying, hey, we're going to be below 6. We're going to be in a 5 rate, maybe not a low 5, but a mid 5 or a high 5 this year. Now nobody's making that call.
Yeah.
Now I think NBA's got us maybe at a 6.5% rate, which is just a 0.5% improvement from where we would be right now. But it does seem to be a certain amount of people, the frog in the pot, getting accustomed to a new normal. Does that make them, to put now your word and sell? Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right.
The FHA is always a vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, but add multiple years at that. So what I'm looking at once again is I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 years from now.
Yep.
How much pressure is there going to be on? Hey, guess what? We got a bunch of people who can't afford this anymore, don't want to afford it anymore, and would rather spend half that much on rent. I mean, that's going to be pretty high. Wages stagnate. So we're at right around, depending on if you count quantitative tightening, which we want to get into, but if wages stagnate and if we were to inflate 40% like what Chris had talked about a few years ago on separate programs, you have individuals spending 20%, 40% more on everything.
Right.
How much pressure does that put on paying for their house, on their marriage, on the things that cause people to say, that stagnation of wages, I'm not saying that it will happen. These are all just possibilities that could happen.
Well, the government intervention.
Yeah, that's huge, right? We were just talking about that.
Yeah. Well, heck, I'm hearing there's talk about the government talking about rate buy downs.
That's right.
Rate buy downs. Could you imagine?
Yeah. No, anything the government is going to do, we were talking about it with regard to, hey, let's save these tenants.
Right.
The rents are all going to go skyrocketing.
Right. Unintended consequences.
What about, I had read home equity lines of credit.
With Freddie Mac jumping in?
Yeah.
Would that be something?
And if they go ahead and do that, people, it's very attractive, and people aren't going to really change their spending habits, especially.
But what would that mean? What does that mean if Freddie Mac jumps into the HELOC marketplace? Does it mean they're just more attractive rates? What does that even mean?
It means availability. I went to U.S. Bank, and all of my rental income. Let's just say I'm fine.
Okay.
My loan to value ratio on my home. I'll just say it's a $2 million home. I only owe $340,000 on it.
Okay.
Guess what they offered me 8 months ago as a home equity line of credit?
How much, how
much? And this is with all my houses and my income. So
you had $2 million, a $300,000 loan. So you've got a 15% loan to value.
Yeah.
At
3%. How much do they offer me?
How much additional equity you get?
How much? It's a home equity line of credit.
They'll let you go up to 60%.
No, they offered me $100,000.
What?
Yeah, they offered me $100,000. Part of it is that what
were the good old days when we could get 120% loan to value?
Exactly.
Right.
So I didn't use that, and I probably would have only used it.
But that's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. The thing is that if we make available home equity lines of credit, that will help if we start to go through a recession. It'll help spur on the economy, soften the blow to the economy because people will go out and spend that money. But then what happened to all the equity items that we had talked to, the equity that people had that we said, why is it that we don't, honey, we could go rent for $2,500, but we have a house for $2,300. Well, you add a home equity line of credit, and that equity goes by, and it feels a little bit more like it did in 2006.
Very much so.
Yes.
Very, very much so.
Government intervention with HELOCs.
That's the house, but that's Yeah, well, there's two different forms. I mean, I initially was
it's
thinking,
very similar.
Well, no, I was thinking, I don't know what you had in mind when you typed government intervention, but there's been this talk about the government buying down interest rates.
That's right.
Okay, fine. Freddie Mac jumping into HELOCs. It just feels like additional availability of funds, which frankly can I mean, if that happens, I mean, we'll all get excited about it, and geez, who knows, I might even participate in that. So, okay, great, let's take some cash out at an attractive rate. But man, that just sounds dangerous.
Well, what would
that
happen?
Sounds really dangerous.
But it would spur on the economy. Well, but what would likely happen is all the credit card debt that we're seeing, and there's not as much as you would think. Americans they did learn a lot, it seems to me.
Right.
From the Great Recession and the housing debacle. They did learn a lot. They're more self-disciplined than I would have given them credit for. Nevertheless, there's still a lot of spending that on credit cards and in other places that home equity line of credit would be a lower interest rate than their 20%.
Well, it would be, and that would be very attractive.
Yeah.
But I mean, it wasn't that long ago when used cars were more expensive than new cars were a few years before. And the RV market and the boat market, and it's like, oh my God, everything is extremely expensive because of all this cash flush. And frankly, we've kind of reached a little bit more of an equilibrium now. I mean, car prices are a little bit more reasonable. Lots have a few more cars on them. You can't sell a used RV for $50,000 that you used to be able to buy it for $20,000. This, I think, reverses all of that. It just puts all this extra cash. What is it? Just increases the supply because we're not responsible Americans.
I've been waiting for when the government jumped in to insuring the HELOCs. I've been expecting. Think about this, Americans. I forget what the number is. Thornburg always talks about how many trillions of dollars. We're the wealthiest we've ever been.
Right.
I've been waiting for at some point. The market says, let's go tap that.
Yeah.
At some point, I don't know when it's going to happen.
But even if you think it's a bad idea, we do bad ideas all the time.
They do it all. I'm not saying it's a good or bad. I'm just saying this is a threat. This is threat. This is something that would, over time, increase housing supply. That's it.
Yeah.
And whenever you have little or no equity.
Yeah, by the way, I just heard about this. When did you hear about this? Like within the last few days?
Last 2 weeks.
Yeah, okay. Well, I just heard about it like a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
Okay, which it's right. So there you go. To me, you could just say Freddie Mac jumping into the HELOC market is the unexpected black swan event.
No, I would just say that's not the unexpected.
No, I know.
Then there's things that aren't even on this list.
Of course.
Inevitably that show up.
Right.
So if I'm a betting guy, and I'm a probabilities guy.
Right.
What is the likelihood that none of these will happen none of them ever occur over the next 5 years?
Right.
It's pretty low.
Well, ironically, and again, it's the first time I've seen your list, the one that I think over time could do the biggest damage is Freddie Mac jumping into HELOCs.
I think that you continue to add FHA buyers. That's inevitable. That's going to happen.
Well, that too. But to me, that's the equivalent of, I can remember, and you were there too, and we would drive down the same freeway. You drive down the 91 freeway. I guess this is probably 2003, 4, 5. And you could get, 100% loan to value on a second.
125.
Then the billboard, the 100 would be crossed out. 110% loan to value. And then you drive by 2 weeks later, the 110 would be 120% loan to value. And I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We're on residential real estate.
Right.
Now granted, there was rates, wow.
So those were just things I wanted to say. If supply seems to be the only thing buoying prices, what are the items that could increase supply? Right. Those are just a few that were easy. They were like low-hanging fruit to throw up.
I gotcha. Well, these and they bode for a very interesting / scary future.
This is
what do you got here,
Chris? Not trying to flatter you, bro, but you should have thrown this out more often, at least in my opinion.
Yep.
But this is also one of the things that is foundational for me. It's just a phenomenal explanation, but foundational.
This is a Chris Thornburg quote, just so we're clear.
Correct.
Yep.
5 years down the road, to look 5 years down the road, and I had bets with real estate people that said we will never see 8% interest rates by this time.
Yeah.
And Chris said it was 10, so all I did is I'm going to go 2. I thought we'd hit 8% anyhow. But long story short is, this was really good. I have heard no one in the U.S. explain this, and this was a blurb in some, on some website. But he said, when the Fed, I'm paraphrasing the first part, when the Fed increased the number of dollars into the system, we're talking about not long
trillions
after
of dollars.
Okay, and then it goes on with this quote: by 40%, holding all else equal, you can anticipate a 40% increase in prices. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can kind of see that. You can kind of see a blue liquid in a glass that's half full, and I take 40% of the amount that's in that glass, but it's clear. I can anticipate that it's about 40% less blue. All right, and I just thought, no one else put it that way, man.
Yeah.
But he said, this is in 2022, he said, we're about 8% into it, and we have about 32% to go. So the potential for inflation in front of us is vastly more than the inflation that we've seen behind us. I don't know. Have you heard anyone explain it that simply as to where we are with inflation and why we went from, shall we say, 7% to 6.5, and everybody's given applause to the Fed for getting it down to 3.4, but it's going to remain higher for longer? That's what we keep hearing from the Fed, right?
Yeah.
They've got to be smart enough to be able to kind of see that as well.
Well, again, maybe you're giving them too much credit.
I don't think so. I think they're pretty brilliant guys up there. I'm not to say I like them or anything,
Right.
but I think it's too easy to tear them down. But I really like the way that it made perfect sense to me. You can see the physics in that. When I feel like I'm blessed. I'm super blessed in that I hear bull crap, and it's bull crap.
Yeah.
But when I hear someone say something that's that's the truth, that's when my multiple choice test, I go, oh, that's the right answer.
Yeah.
And so I hear everybody talking about and other economists. I love Logan Motoshami.
Yeah.
Great guy.
I do
love his
too.
hair. Great hair.
Great, yeah.
Great hair.
Yeah, you guys
But-
almost, yeah.
But he hasn't put it this way
No.
at all. We haven't seen any. You got something up every day. He hasn't put it up there. But Thornburg called this 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
But the year before, he wasn't touching inflation because he was in the studio. We were talking inflation, and it was it wasn't even part of his presentation.
in 2021, he was
Yeah.
he was talking about where we would be headed potentially.
But it
inflation.
wasn't. It was almost like a throwaway. And matter of fact, Kyle from
Yeah.
Claremont McKenna, his words exactly. We were in the studio here, and he kind of was like almost. He meant it as a joke, and he put it in context of, hey, if I fall out of my boat when I'm on the river, and my hat falls off, and as I'm swimming into the boat, I don't give a shit about my hat. It's like, fuck the hat. Those are words he used, okay? Now he was putting that in the context, those are his words. Okay. And go back and listen to it. And then he was putting it in the context of we're coming out of COVID.
Yeah.
We've got all this additional spending. The country has fallen out of its boat. And if we get a little bit of inflation, those were my words, not his.
Yeah.
Screw inflation.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, it almost sounded cavalier, but he truly meant it. It
Yeah.
was and now here we are, in this inflation battle, and it's, we've got $20, Happy Meals at McDonald's, and $20 an hour wages for fast food workers, and a lot of self-imposed inflation, I suppose.
Inflation's a bummer, but in the past, wages have. I think we will get wage inflation. If you look at our demographics. We have the baby boomers who are, we need more workers. We probably don't have enough of them. So they're probably, save a really bad recession, they're probably going to have a lot of clout to be able to demand what's required in order to get the job done.
Well, on this topic, assuming you guys we're almost an hour, maybe a little more than an hour into this, and we're not going to stop until we're done. No. But if you've made it this far, this interview will be available before Chris's forecast on the 29th of March, which today's the 23rd. We'll get this out probably the 24th or 25th. So we're going to find out. So if you've made it this far, join us on the 29th of May, and
You're a nerd.
We'll see, exactly. Yeah, well, hey, I would have done it. Okay,
come on.
Personal takeaways. Let's bring it home, baby.
I once again, we talked about probabilities, so bets. The bad bets, I would say a bad bet is looking for real estate to appreciate much beyond where it has right now. We got back to that 17% affordability. I don't think it's going to go up much more.
Yep.
If we have significant for unknown reasons wage inflation, then yeah, we could potentially, if supply remains low, we could see price appreciation. I don't think it'll be very much, but strategies that go ahead and that are saying, hey, I need appreciation in order to make my money, like investors making $20,000, and appreciation gave them 50 because it took them 6 months to do it. Not going to work well.
Yep.
Speculating on
Totally agree.
Yeah, speculating on buy hold investments with 30-year mortgages. We were talking to Barry here. It just doesn't work anymore.
Yep.
30-year more. I mean, I don't know that's going to diminish demand. It has already, but my God, no one's going to be doing that math and thinking, let's do this. So with a 5-year outlook, I don't expect the traditional avenues within real estate as an investor that worked since 2009 or 2010. I don't believe that they're going to produce remotely the returns that it did. So that would be a bad bet in saying, hey, I'm just going to keep doing things the way that I know how to do them. And then if you maintain a high risk, tolerance, and you're aggressive, I think that you're out of business fairly quickly, and you're one of the people that gets. Mike Cantu, a good friend of mine, he had a presentation back in 2006. Don't get voted off Real Estate Island, which is like a takeoff on Survivor. Yeah. I think that we're going to see a lot of people voted off, and as investors, you're already seeing them as agents, but you're going to see them as investors as well. So if you were going to make the best bets in my mind, the best probability would be a receding tide all across the board. It's going to be tough, whether it's people, whether it's the profits that you made because of price appreciation, and they saved you from getting your tail handed to you. I would bet on a receding tide in real estate for the next 5 years. I think that would be a decent bet with the things that we talked about.
Yep.
And a good bet is you better have a very fast turnaround time for flips. So I do buy.
Don't make a mistake.
Yeah. You better not. The thing is most people do make mistakes. I called up people in 2022 when it was decreasing. People I had known for 15, 16 years. And I go, oh, dude, you sold that house for that investor, that Newport investment company. And I go, they lost like 70 grand. I just did the math. Man, why didn't you call me? He's all, Nick, that was me. No.
I lost like 70 grand.
He lost 70 grand. He's like, you're exactly dead on. I lost 70 grand. So investor attrition is going to take place, whether it's buy, fix, and flip. Buy, hold guys are going to leave too. Yep. The real estate investor career, so it's been on fire because of HGTV, flip this house, flip flop, all those cheese balls.
Seen one of those.
Yeah, all those cheese balls, as well as now it's really more available on Instagram for all the young people. They go on Instagram and it's attractive for that. Get rich quick. That's going to be out the door. That is, unless we do have a price correction. If we do have that price correction, I think all of us make more. Those of us in the business make more money because the number of transactions increase.
Yeah, well, I get that. Okay.
So either way, when I say best bets, and I'm talking about receding tide and all this negative stuff, the brightest entrepreneurs that come in, they're going to do great. Right. The brightest, the best. That's always the case.
But that's always the case.
Yeah, that's right.
That's my 95.5, and we'll work through this as I'm wiping away a tear and choking. It's I've got my 95.5. My 95.5 also applies, I think, to investors. 95.5 is 95% of the real estate agents are doing 95% of the business. Mm-hmm. They're the killers. Those are the guys who are adjusting. They're constantly making their plan. And they're in my opinion, they're doing what you and I are doing. They're looking at this data, they're overanalyzing it, they're obsessing with it, trying to make a plan, testing it. But I think the same thing is going to be true with the investors. There's going to be 5%, maybe less, 1 or 2% of the investors that are going to see the opportunity. They're going to make the right adjustment, and they're going to kill it. They're going to kill it.
Mm-hmm. The best case scenario is a slow kind of 1990 to January 1997. That's the best case scenario, and people can survive because it's not dropping so fast. Right. The speed at which that drops makes it crazy painful.
Catching the falling knife.
Well, and so when we talk about all these real estate investors, the reality is that if you have a speedier, like we were dropping off, could happen with supply. If it dropped off, if we were to experience a drop off like we experienced in 2022, that is July 22 through January 2023.
6 months.
Those people don't have enough money to survive. As much as we think they're making flipping houses or wholesaling houses, they're gone.
Right. Well, if that had continued for whatever reason,
that's right.
The supply increase and that had continued, we'd be having a very different conversation.
That's right.
Now.
You better have a lot of dough saved.
Yep.
Because when the most painful time is whenever prices correct.
Right.
It was hard on me.
Yeah.
You know, it was difficult. So
well, and your average investor of any sort, or even forget about your average investor, your average homeowner doesn't have the patience or the emotional fortitude to ride it out. It's very, especially after what again, forget about the investor. I just look at the homeowners, and you take a look at, and the younger homeowners that saw their parents lose the property, or saw grandma and grandpa lose a property in 2007, 8, 9, 10, whatever it happened to be, and licking their wounds in 2010. It's so funny. Not that I want to go back, but if you go back to those charts in 2000 when affordability was the highest.
55%.
What's that?
55%.
And that was in 2010?
Correct.
Ish, okay.
And it stayed there for a while.
And nobody was buying, except the hedge funds.
Well, no.
Well, except and the smart investors.
Yeah.
But I'm just talking your average buyer out there, not you, not the experienced folks out there, but your average buyer out there who should have been buying houses. They were snake bit and they were scared.
Yeah.
And people like you weren't scared. People like Apollo Global Management and all
I
the...
was scared.
I was. But you know what you did though? You looked at the charts. And you
what it was is I was very conservative. Saved everything that I could from 1998 to 2005, and I lived off savings from 2005 to 2011. I did.
Okay. So, and you were nervous because it was a long window.
It wasn't supposed to. It was supposed to be over, in my opinion, without government intervention. It would have been over by 2009.
But there you go.
Yes.
But there you go.
That's right.
So we were doing my God, foreclosure moratoriums and encouraging people to modify mortgages.
Made it worse.
And making it worse.
That's
and the moratorium. And again, I would lose my mind over these moratoriums. But everyone looked at me, oh man, you're just being selfish because you got the Fannie Mae and you got the Freddie Mac and you want more foreclosures. I'm like, really? I want a real estate market that's healthy and reasonable and predictable, that's not being interfered with.
It's called capitalism.
Yeah, well, do we have that? We certainly have less of that.
Yeah,
like all the foreclosure moratoriums and then the loan modifications, I'd have these people come and asking me for loan modifications, and I'd say, and again, they felt like I felt that they were like, oh, Lance is just being self-serving. He was encouraging foreclosures. I would never encourage it. If you can afford your house, keep it. But you're going to modify a horrible loan, okay? And ultimately, the house right next door to you is sold for 20% lower than the mortgage that you're modifying. I'm not encouraging you to walk away from it if you can afford it, but you had people that were modifying loans that couldn't afford it in the first place.
That's right.
Okay. Why? Because they got liar loans that they never should have had in the first place. In many cases, anyway. But yeah, government intervention.
Government intervention, man.
Yeah.
And I don't know what form that takes.
I think we're still dealing with it, quite honestly.
Well, I don't think it ends anymore.
Right. Well, and if we go back a slide, which I'm not going to, but you go into the literally the words government intervention.
That's right.
Yeah, I have. By the way, if anybody wants, I'm going to write a book, or somebody's going to write. You're going to write a book. Yes. Somebody needs to write a book, and it needs to be called Government Policy Bubble. Okay.
Okay.
And you know why?
Why?
Because I own the domain. GovernmentPolicyBubble.com.
Oh, there you go.
I bought it in 2008 or 9.
Right after Housing Bubble Guy.
I was like, you know what? Hey, man, someone's going to give me $500,000 because they're going to write a book or they're going to make a movie and they're going to call it that, and someone's going to call me and they're going to want that domain and they're going to have to pay.
Yes.
So GovernmentPolicyBubble.com.
I love that.
I own that.
But you didn't pick up Zillow or Amazon.
I did not.
What's the use, Lance?
Somebody's going to write that book.
Okay.
Government
I'm all about it.
Okay, we're at the bottom of this slide. I think you got one more. I think. Okay, this is your last slide. So let's bring it home, baby.
We don't need to spend a lot of time on this. It's really just to remind whoever's watching this, but it reminds me of just being an independent thinker.
Yep.
And that is, I didn't hear many predictions that we were going to lose 16%. Because of price declines, and that's what it looked like right here in 2022.
So this is 2022 to beginning of 2023.
And then I didn't hear anybody saying, guess what, everybody, no big deal. It's going to zoom right back up in February of 2023 and have it be, the blue is price increases, so the red is diminishment. No one said, so I'm not expecting, it'd be great to hear something really specific from Thornburg, but I'm not expecting too many people to provide me with accurate, dependable, logical arguments that cause me to say, that's part of my multiple choice test, and therefore being able to move on, move very quickly, being able to pivot extremely fast, having all of one of the most important things is having enough income that covers your monthly nut if you're not flipping houses or doing other stuff. And so I learned that from the 2007 debacle, and I'm not expecting anyone to make these calls for us. So whenever I say what I think or what I think it's going to happen, I made that prediction last year based on the trajectory that we had already seen. If I just followed that trajectory, that line,
understood,
it would have been November of 2024. I still believe whether it's through wage inflation or the other items, whether it's just price correction, I still believe all those pressures are there because people respond similarly to stimuli.
Okay. So you feel very similar to that.
I do. I'm not confident in when it's going to happen.
So what have you done in the last year? Was last year a 2005 moment for you where you were exiting? I was
no. This time around, I learned my lesson in 2006 through 2015, shall we say? Okay. The long lesson of just have as little debt absolutely as possible. Right. So that has been it's been ongoing since that time. Right. So that properties that are rental properties are providing strong cash flow in and of themselves. They support themselves. Right. So there wasn't.
So if you've got a correction, at least you're not. You might lose some paper equity.
I don't even care if I don't care. Right. In fact, I've been expecting oscillations like we see in cycles. Right. I don't care well, not for my properties that I'm holding. I could care less. That's not their job. Yeah. Their job is to provide income, and as opposed to having mortgages on them, it's either there's no more. Most of them have zero mortgage.
Well, Nick, I can tell you this: you sure as heck don't fly by the seat of your pants. If anything, you give it some thought. You think it through. And I love you, brother. Welcome back, man.
All right.
All right. So Nick is the last in studio interview of our 2024 real estate market forecast. You guys should be watching this before our actual event next week, which is going to be May 29th at Cal Baptist University. Nick, thanks again, brother.
All right.
All right, man. You got it. Okay, we'll see you guys May 29th.